This is my audience. No cards. Raise your hand if you've ever been frustrated by an unexpected car battery death. Well, unfortunately I have. My sister's car battery kept dying a month ago and we didn't understand why. So we took it to AutoZone and got it checked up on, and they told us that the alternator had gone bad. So my sister, being the way she is, she made me do all the research on YouTube and on her car to replace the alternator. And with that information today, I'll show you how to change an alternator in a car, given the knowledge you need to handle the crucial DIY auto maintenance job. Before I get into explaining how to do it, I'm going to explain how an alternator works in your car. An alternator converts mechanical energy into electrical energy. While engine is running, the alternator turns power created by engine to produce energy. To start this process, you'll need to gather all your tools. You'll need a socket wrench to unhook the bolts, a screwdriver to unhook all the electric components, a belt tensor tool to remove the belt, a multimeter to test the charge voltage, and then lastly, you'll obviously need a new alternator. Some things you can use is rags and gloves if you want to keep yourself clean. To access the alternator, you need to go into the engine bay, which typically resides at the front of cars, but sometimes in luxury cars it's in the back. Here's a diagram of what an alternator is supposed to look like. This thing right here, and you got the serpentine belt and the tensor right there. To begin this process, it's crucial that you unhook the negative terminal off the battery as to not shock yourself or to mess up the car. Then begin to relieve the tensor pulley. The tensor pulley is this one, by hooking a large wrench up to it to take off the serpentine belt. It loosens the serpentine belt. When disconnecting the old alternator, you have to remove the 3 electrical connections with a screwdriver, precisely a flathead screwdriver. Then you find the 3 bolts on the alternator, and the bolts typically reside on the left and the right, and then there's one on the top. You take that off with a socket wrench. Then it's crucial that you maintain like force on the alternator as to not drop the alternator through the engine bay. When you take off the bolts, the alternator will pop out, and make sure you clean those bolts for the new alternator. It gives it better connection. To install the new alternator, you put it where the old alternator sat, place the bolts back in, use a socket wrench, use the socket wrench and put it in tight, but not too tight, as you're probably going to need a new alternator down the line and you don't want it to be stuck. Then you put the serpentine belt on it and relieve the socket, or you pull the long wrench out of the the tensor belt, and then reattach the negative terminal, and you should be able to start your car. If you hear abnormal noises in the car, turn it off and make sure everything's connected right. So in this presentation, I taught you guys how to gather this tools, get access to the alternator, disconnect and remove the old alternator, install a new alternator, and test the car. I chose this because it teaches you like satisfaction of like you know how to change an alternator, and it's also financially good because you don't have to pay all that maintenance fee. And you can confidently take on a crucial repair and keep your alternator operating smoothly now that you know how to install the alternator.